Hello and welcome to the Daily Aus. I'm Emma Gillespie.
I'm Lucy Tassell. If you've noticed an increase in the number of flies wherever you are in the country right now, no, it's not just you. Summer is always a time of increased fly numbers, but is there actually anything out of the ordinary going on right now? We've got something a little different to kick off your week, but stick with us.
Yeah, I want to introduce you to a man named Dr. Bryan Lessard, also known as Bry the Fly Guy, and he is on a mission to defend the tarnished reputation of the humble fly. And in today's deep dive, he is going to explain why and when fly populations increase, but more than that, he has spent his career learning why these sometimes annoying critters are actually a lot more important and useful than you might think. He is an award-winning entomologist, science communicator and children's author based in Canberra, and he joins me now. Dr. Bryan Lessard, Bry the Fly Guy, welcome to the Daily Aus podcast. It's so exciting to be chatting to you.
Thanks for having me. I'm so keen to chat to you.
We have a lot of questions for you. We've crowdsourced a few of them from the office, but I suppose the biggest one to kick things off is all of us have noticed more flies around lately, the last few days especially, not just us here in the Sydney office, but we've heard reports from across New South Wales and Victoria. Is it just us? Is something going on?
Nah, there's definitely more flies this time of year than a few months ago in winter. So no one's going crazy. And it's the perfect storm of heat and rain as well. So when it rains, the water seeps into the ground and it triggers the flies to hatch out of the cocoon-like pupal cases. And then they emerge into this flurry of adults. And when it's warmer, they get way more active too. So that's why it's pretty much schoolies for flies now. The adults have one thing on the mind, and it's pretty much to find a date.
Wow. So does that mean if the rain triggers more eggs to hatch, that the kind of, I don't know if this is the right term, but like the gestation period for a fly is weather dependent rather than time dependent?
Yeah, definitely weather dependent. In winter, it gets really cold, obviously, and our flies can't cope with it. So it's kind of sad because most of the adult flies actually die off in winter, but they actually go into hibernation, the eggs and some of the cocoon-like pupal cases, and they wait for it to warm up in springtime. And that's right now. And then they're kind of reliant on that rain to kind of soften the soil so they can emerge and crawl out and then swarm to the nearest flower and have a drink of nectar and, pretty much live the best life.
Wow. I don't think many people realize that they come from out of the ground.
Yeah, so flies generally lay their eggs in the soil, particularly blowflies. So everyone knows if they've gone for a hike and they've seen a dead kangaroo that there's a lot of larvae or maggots crawling around in there. So after they have their little festy feast, they crawl off into the soil and pupate, kind of like when a caterpillar goes into a cocoon.
I'm sure a lot of listeners are hearing the words blowfly and feeling a little uncomfortable. They don't get the best rap, but you have made this your career being an expert on all things flies and insects. So can you tell us why they are necessary for the ecosystem? What's the actual role they play?
I used to hate flies like everyone until I started studying them, and particularly blowflies. So I learned that blowflies could help solve crime, and that sparked my interest. And that's because, yeah. So if you ever watch Bones or CSI, you always have that forensic entomologist specialist. So if someone dies, the blowflies can lay their eggs on that corpse within minutes of that person passing away. So you can use the size of the maggot as an indication of its age to help identify when that crime occurred. And I thought that was pretty amazing. And then I started studying flies and thought they were pretty awesome.
Wow, that is intense. What is the reason that flies are attracted to decay in that way?
Yeah, it's not all flies that are attracted to smelly, gross stuff, mostly the blowflies, because they've exploited this gross habitat where no other insects want to live, those rotting corpses. And so what the female does is lay her eggs in them, and then the larvae eat that rotten meat, And what they're actually doing is they're recycling that nutrients and turning it into compost so other fungi and plants can use those nutrients. Otherwise, they'd be lost and we'd be waist deep in waste without flies.
Wow. So it sounds a little bit grim at the surface, but there's actually a much bigger kind of recycling purpose to this.
Definitely. And if you enjoy chowing down on your smashed avo, berry smoothies, and mango for brunch, you definitely want to appreciate the blowflies as well.
Why?
Because blowflies are actually really important pollinators and they have a sweet tooth like us. So they drink the sugary nectar from flowers and help cross-pollinate that. So there's farmers in Australia that are actually encouraging the native blowflies into their orchards to help pollinate our mangoes, avocados, berries, the hops that we use to brew beer with, and also the grapes that we use to make wine. Did you know without flies, there'd be no chocolate? That's because the most important pollinator of the cacao plant that we make chocolate from is a teeny tiny fly about the size of a pinhead. And it's the only fly small enough to crawl through its flowers and pollinate it. So if we didn't have this fly and flies in general, we'd be living in an apocalypse, which would be pretty evil.
Well, we must do everything we can to save the flies.
Hey, I can get behind that.
Why are flies so much more prevalent in the more regional, remote parts of the country? You know, you drive out of the cities in the summer and it seems like they are 10 times worse.
Hi, I'm Zara. I'm the co-founder of the Daily Aus, and we started this company because we think news can be done differently. If you agree, you can hit subscribe. It's the best way to help us grow. Now, back to the video.
The reason why we might notice more flies when we're out in remote Australia is because there's not a lot of water sources in some areas. So they're actually coming to us for a drink, particularly the pesky bush fly. If you've ever gone for a hike or walked outside and the bush flies are coming at your eyes, ears, and nose, they definitely have a reason to do that. And it's because you're a walking sports drink, essentially.
Wow, because I was going to actually ask you, and I wonder if this all ties in. Can you explain sometimes why it feels like a fly is locked in on a particular person and follows them around? You know, you just see that sometimes even in the office here, it can happen and it's like, oh my God, am I stinky?
You're not stinky. If it is a bush fly, they're quite thirsty creatures, so they're actually looking for a drink. So that's why they always come and try and drink the tears from our eyes, the mucus from our nose, and even our saliva, because our bodily fluids are actually high in protein, electrolytes, and moisture too. So we're walking sports drinks to them. So that's why they're annoying us. Mosquitoes, on the other hand, and some blood-feeding flies like horseflies or march flies can actually smell us. So they're locked into the CO2, the carbon dioxide that we're breathing out. So they can actually pick up that scent, and they can also see our body temperature too as a target. So with horseflies in particular, it's only the females that bite because she needs the protein in our blood to ripen her eggs. And without it, she couldn't have fertile young. But she's also a really important pollinator as well. And males are really awesome. They're vegetarian and they just drink nectar from flowers all day, so they won't annoy us.
Are the most common flies that we're kind of seeing at the moment, are they horseflies or bush flies or something else?
Well, that's the thing. Aussies think that there's only 2 or 3 species of flies in Australia, like the ones that pretty much annoy us, like the bush flies and blowflies. But there's actually 30,000 species of flies just living in Australia. And they do all sorts of things. One of my favorite flies is called a bee fly. It looks like a bee, that's why it's called a bee fly, because it pollinates flowers. But I think they should be called twerking flies, because the females will actually land on sand and twerk in the ground, and she'll coat her eggs in sand, and then she flies around and launches them in spider burrows. And then those eggs hatch into hungry larvae that eat spiders. So bee flies are actually helping to keep our spider population down.
Wow. Okay, well, I'll try to remember that next time I think bad thoughts about flies. Why do we think that flies are dirty? I guess there's this image that we all probably have of, the roadkill with the flies around it, or the kind of CSI, more gory detail there. Are they dirty? Should we be worried if they land on us?
The majority of flies are not dirty. It's just a misconception that keeps perpetuating through pop culture and also my arch nemesis, Louis the Fly. Most flies will never come anywhere near us. Of course, there are the flies that can transmit some diseases. So there is a worry that if a blowfly lands on your sausage sandwich, its legs might be dirty because it was hanging out at a rotting kangaroo. So there could potentially be a transfer of those bacteria. So always cover your food. But the majority of flies leave us alone, essentially. And particularly maggots. Maggots get a really bad reputation, where maggot spit is actually cleaner than human spit, pretty much. Researchers have found that black soldier fly larvae, you might have seen them churning through your compost in the backyard. The spit actually has antimicrobial properties to reduce the E. coli in our compost too. And then one of my favorite professions is called a maggot nurse. And there are nurses at Westmead Hospital that actually use sterile blowfly larvae to treat diabetic ulcers and necrotic tissue because those larvae are clean and the spit helps ward off secondary infections. And this might sound nasty, but it's actually quite useful. The wriggling around of the larvae in the flesh actually helps stimulate circulation and promote wound healing, which is pretty incredible.
Wow, I'm learning so much from you. This is fascinating stuff. I guess with this bad PR that we've seen over generations against flies and knowing all these incredible things that they can do, when people see a fly infestation or, maybe there's a bunch buzzing around the house, they immediately grab the spray can. What are we getting wrong? And when should we actually be concerned about the number of flies?
So spraying flies with chemicals is such a bad idea, not only just to the fly, but also human health. We don't want these chemicals in our house. The problem with these chemicals, they're so high in pesticides that when it rains, they actually flush down our gutters and end up in our waterways and has a knock-on effect to other insects and fish as well. So preferably put down the spray. Some tips that I would recommend to get rid of flies is obviously have fly screens in your house. Remove your bins, your kitchen waste bin quite regularly, because as soon as that becomes smelly, blowflies will want to get in. And just shoo flies away and let them pollinate another day. Such good advice.
Shoo flies away and let them pollinate another day. I love that. Bry, when we're looking forward to the summer ahead, are we anticipating that it's going to be a particularly popular summer for flies after a rainier period across parts of the country?
It's probably going to be a bumper season for flies because when the temperatures get warmer, which is predicted for this summer, we'll probably see a lot more insect activity, particularly flies. If you're less inclined to my fly friends this summer, you can definitely do a few things to let them be less annoying. So you can wear long sleeve and long pants. That'll keep biting flies like horseflies and mosquitoes off of your body so they can't actually bite you. You can wear topical insect repellent to get rid of them, and also just avoid dusk and dawn too if you don't want to be bit by mosquitoes. A lot of people don't realize that mosquitoes are actually flies. So mosquitoes have two wings. Yeah. So mosquitoes have two wings, and that's what defines a fly. And the word mosquito is actually Spanish for little fly, which is kind of cute.
That is kind of cute. You're doing very, very good reputation rehab for the entire fly/mosquito world here. I just have one last question for you, and that's, what is the one thing you wish people knew about flies, or that you want them to take away from this conversation, the next time they swat one away?
Oh, flies are the ultimate underdogs, and they're actually trying to help us have a better life, and we just take them for granted. So the essential workers of our ecosystem, pollinating our native flowers help churning through our compost to make it better. And they're actually really beautiful when you put them under the microscope. You can appreciate their hidden beauty. Some of them will look like little opals. Some of them are so pretty that I named them after Beyonce, and new species after RuPaul as well, because they're quite fierce and stunning creatures. So I just encourage everyone to challenge your expectations with flies, and maybe give them the chance of day just to appreciate them maybe in the backyard.
Dr. Bryan, Bry the Fly Guy, it's been absolutely fascinating to learn so much from you. Thank you for joining us on the Daily Aus.
Thanks so much for having me. Time definitely flies.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode, and a huge thanks to Dr. Bryan Lessard for speaking with us. If you want to learn more about flies and everything he's doing, you can look him up on Instagram at Bry the Fly Guy, and we will pop that handle in the show notes. We'll be back with the headlines later on this afternoon. Until then, have a great start to your week.